But our next guest now is a very special guest that we have who's joined us here in the studio. He is the first visually impaired student to graduate from Wharton Business School. He's someone who's been honored with India's highest civilian award for a disabled individual. And he is an ace trader as well and a hedge fund manager. Ashish Goyal, hedge fund manager at BlueCrest Capital Management, joins us now in the studio. Ashish, good morning. It is our utmost pleasure to host you in our studios this morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And before asking you about the markets and what you expect to see,
Sure.
You've got the national award that you received for empowerment of persons with disabilities, and you've been trading as well for so many years. How do you manage to do it?
I think it's just a passion and love for macroeconomics and financial markets that I've been able to do this, and obviously help with technology. Technology has enabled for someone like me to be doing a job that no blind person had ever done before. And along with that, the trust that my first employer internationally, JP Morgan, showed in me, and then how I managed to make most of what I was given. So that's how I've been doing this job.
All right. How many years have you been a trader, Ashish?
Overall, 10 years, 3 years in India with ING Western Bank, and then 7 years abroad now.
Well, would your disadvantage be an advantage? Does it shut out some kind of noise?
That's what everybody wants to believe, but I mean, for
You're
me,
as subject to noise as others?
exactly. For me, what's crucial is that I'm very focused on the fundamentals.
Okay.
And for me, intraday price action, etc., doesn't matter because I'm on the investment side, so I can ignore price action intraday. And I do believe that this focusing on reading things and listening to things, I do remain focused much more actually.
Okay. So on the Indian markets itself, what is your own prognosis? How has the trade been so far? I mean, it's been a flat year for us with so much volatility, but what's your own expectation?
If you put India on a relative basis as compared to what's happened across the world in emerging markets, India is a clear outperformer. I mean, you can leave China aside because Chinese equity markets do their own things most times. On the bond side, on the currency side, on the stock side, India has clearly been the outstanding trade for the last year and a half, with all other emerging markets being quite significantly weaker. I think the two things. One, India cannot stand alone if there's a massive global anti-EM sentiment beyond a point. And secondly, I think the transition that people were hoping for takes time because we've come from a very long period of poor performances, both on the government side and on the economy side. And that takes time to turn around. So yes, we priced in a lot, but it doesn't mean it won't happen. So I'm still pretty positive on India.
Okay, but which will be the inflection quarter as far as earnings growth are concerned? Since you track fundamentals, the slew of earnings that we have got, and we've got just maybe 1/4 of the earnings due. All of them show very poor top line growth, even those that have shown margin improvement.
So I'm a macro person. I look at growth as a whole, and I'm not an equities specialist. But I think this year is going to be the transition year. I can't give you a specific quarter, but you're actually seeing underlying growth pick up already. If you look at production data, you look at capex, you look at consumption, that's started to pick up on the ground. And with the macro factors improving, like inflation being under control, the current account coming in quite a lot, I think things are ready, and the government is trying to give the right impetus. I think it just will happen. Pointing out the specific quarter and when stocks will stop selling off and start going up, I will not be able to pin down.
No, I'm not looking at stocks being sold off. There will be a lot of technical reasons for that. I'm only pointing to fundamental performance of corporates where revenue growth is either flat or shrunk for most of the companies that reported numbers so far.
This year was going to be the year where the US economy took off. Today is going to be US GDP data in a few hours. we're going to be talking about 1% US GDP growth, which is far from the 3% that people were looking for in Q1 this year. So the thing is, global growth per se is very weak. Eurozone is just trying to come out of this massive 3-4 years of sluggishness and weak growth through the quantitative easing program. So India is also linked and is getting more and more linked to the global cycle. So growth has already bottomed in India. That's evident very clearly. But top line and actual better Indian growth will happen as the global cycle turns as well.
Ashish, I'm sure you get this a lot, but it's extremely inspirational to see you sit here and talk about, trading, the macro setup and all of that. I wanted to ask you, what were the initial challenges that you faced before you started trading, and how much time did it really take you to convince people that you were good at what you do?
So honestly, it took a lot of time to convince one bank in India to give me a job. I was the second ranked student in my MBA program at NMIS Nasim Manji. I was shortlisted by every company that came to campus, but I was dropped on the basis that I was blind without being given an interview. And ING was the only bank that actually offered me a job. I became a trader with them in Bangalore. And then I realized after 3 years of working with ING that I still had no takers in the Indian markets. So Mr. Vijay Sarthi from UBS Singapore, he actually recommended that I should go and study abroad in the US at Harvard, Wharton or Stanford. And I took his advice. And even there, because I'm the first person to be doing what I'm doing in my situation, it took a lot of time convincing Wall Street, and then it was few good leaders at JP Morgan that said, okay, fine, we are ready to take a chance on someone like you, and let's see how it works. And they were the only people who judged me on merit and gave me a chance. And after that, it was pure performance. As you know, in our business, if you perform, you're okay. If you don't perform, you're fired. Very simple. So,
and it's high stress as well.
It is high stress, but it's fun. I mean,
well, more than JP Morgan have recognized, you have been chosen by the World Economic Forum as the young global leader of this year. Congratulations for that as well. So recognition has come, even if a bit delayed, Ashish. Well, I want to continue with the economic conversation with just a little bit more. By how many percentage points will, say, the GDP rise in FY16 over FY15? I'm putting this question in this fashion because I know there is a confusion over what base to use.
I think it's going to be. I think the market consensus seems fair to me. Anywhere between 0.6 to 1% is what the GDP growth should be over the previous year, whichever GDP numbers you're taking. But more than that, actually, you need to be focusing on the underlying fundamentals that are changing. And this whole Make in India campaign seems pretty good to me, because it's something that will allow India to not only substitute the imports to a certain extent, technology transfer, as well as become a global exporter, which is what India needs to transition to a certain extent. But all of this, again, takes time. And market needs to be patient.
Okay. Well, finally, if you can give us your view on the rupee as well. Do you see it depreciating enough to be able to make that cut in global markets?
Sorry, when you say
depreciating enough?
Depreciating, the rupee, the fundamentals point towards a very strong rupee. It's trading where it's trading because of the regulators or the Reserve Bank of India accumulating reserves, which is very well known to the markets. The Reserve Bank of India is doing a very balanced, finely balanced job, because at one point they don't want rupee to be extremely overvalued, and they don't want hot money to be flowing into India. But on the other side, they know that once rupee starts weakening, sentiment in India turns south. And we've seen that in 2013. So I think that's a very, very fine line that the RBI is trading. They're doing an excellent job. But I don't think the rupee would weaken if things go as we expect them to go.
Okay, since we have time for one last question, let me once again come to the trading angle, because it's quite a stressful environment when you trade.
Yes.
Is a lot of what you do based on your instinct, based on your gut?
So I think instinct is based on knowledge and experience. And yes, and the most important thing for me is awareness, actually, and that comes from the spiritual side that I believe in, and I believe to take down stress, you need to meditate and you need to trust that there is someone looking out for you, which I've experienced in my life all the way through. So I don't think it's just pure instinct. It's a lot of knowledge and experience, and the awareness that you need to be on top of every piece of information that's coming out, and your views could change as facts change on the ground.
All right, Ashish Goyal, it was a pleasure speaking with you and an honor having you with us in the studio itself. Thank you very much for dropping in.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.